Hi everyone, it's Michelle. I promised you part 2 of a watercoloring video and I wanted to bring that to you today, but I had to apologize because I'm feeling a little bit under the weather, but I didn't want to hang you up by not delivering what I promised. So today we're going to do a watercolor card, well, the card front. A lot of you asked when I posted a picture of the completed card on Facebook how I did that because it involved embossing in a background. So if you remember the other day, the first video, I showed you how to create the backgrounds with the ink. So these aren't technically watercolored backgrounds because we inked them and then sprayed them, but these are the ones that we made the other day when you were watching the video, and look at how beautiful they dried. I mean, the colors are so pretty. So I'm going to choose one of these to work on today so that you can see what a completed card front looks like, okay? So I'm going to flip the camera down and show you all of my supplies first. And then I'm going to pick one of these. Let's see, which one am I going to pick? I have to pick one. Let's see. I'll pick one that's not too dark in color so that you'll be able to see how I'm working. And oh, you know what? I'll use this one today. It has some color, but it's not too bold. So let me flip the camera down, and the rest of the time you won't see me, but you'll hear my voice, and I'll try to speak up so you can catch everything I'm saying. I'm going to give you the basic supplies, and then I will stamp, heat emboss, and I'll begin to watercolor, okay? All right, I'm going to flip the camera down so you can see everything. Okay, everyone. I want to make sure that I'm in the workspace so that you don't miss anything. All right, so the first thing I have to share with you is the stamp itself. Okay, let me pull this camera up a little bit. Let's see. I don't want too much of me. Where are we? Okay, here we are. Here we are. So this is the stamp. It's called Wildflowers by Blue Night Rubber Stamps. It's a beautiful image, and I think what really got me to fall in love with this stamp was the fact that it has some movement in it. It looks like there's a breeze coming in and blowing the flowers this way, this little vine of leaves. So I made this card, posted on Facebook, and I got so many positive responses about it, and people wanted to recreate it on their own and order the stamp from Blue Night Rubber Stamps. So I thought I would make the exact same type of card today. So we have the stamp. I'm going to be using my Misty to stamp it. I've chosen already the background piece that I'm going to use, so I'll set them aside. For watercoloring, I have a number of different tools. I have the classic water brushes, which I love. I mean, they're really terrific. You know, they hold water in the barrel. You squeeze it out, and you could put enough pressure to bring out the kind of water you want. For my use, I always keep one filled with water at my workspace, and sometimes I leave one empty because I like to dip the brush in a water cup and wet the brush and control it that way myself. So I have 2 aqua brushes today. I have here, this is Ranger's little set of brushes, and I love their set of brushes. They're short-handled. The brushes are really nice. They're affordable. You get the whole set together. I keep in the same container a little, this is like a little children's brush, and I use this to brush away the excess embossing powder that might stick to the card front when I stamp and put the embossing powder on. So this is not used for painting, but I keep it here because I use it. I also keep an eyedropper in case I want to take a little drop of water out of my water cup for this purpose. Because while I'm going to be using today Altenews Pan paint set, which I love because it's all of Altenews ink colors in a pan painting set. I'm going to use these today, and you see they're hard little cakes of watercoloring paints. That's going to be my primary source of color today, but I also have always on hand favorite ink pads of colors that I like to use for watercoloring. So these are like colors that I love to use for leaves. These 2 colors I just love when I'm working on pinks. They work really well. So I always keep those on hand when I'm doing floral images, because while I'm using the pans today from Altenews, I also might want to use the ink pads. So when I use ink pads for color, this is what I do. I take the ink pad itself. I have tiles here. They're just, a friend of mine actually had done a job on their home and had extra tiles, so he gave me a stack of these, which is nice. I use these instead of having to go to Home Depot and picking some up, or you could use an acrylic block also. But what I do is I just take a corner. I could fit 4 colors on here. I just stamp the ink pad directly on here. Now you've created your own palette You could pick this up with a water brush. You could spray it with water. So I do a good inking though, and you'll be amazed at how far this will go, this little bit of ink. Okay, now I see there's something on here, so I'm going to take it off so it doesn't transfer to my painting. Okay, so this is what you'll see me doing during this video. And when I stamp that way, that's when I keep the palettes on the side. And if you could see, the other day I used one of the tiles for something and I didn't use all the colors, so I left it, because when I put water on this again, it's going to rejuvenate the colors and refresh them and make them liquid. So I have 3 tiles over here on the side. They're out of the view. I think you can't see them, but I have them there ready to go. I also have my embossing powder. I keep it in a little case like this. Let me see if I can get it open to show you. I keep it in one of these little secure containers, and I have a little mini tasting spoon in here. So you'll see me using that when I heat emboss. What else do I have? Oh, I have a mister bottle of my water, because that's kind of necessary, as well as the cup of water that I showed you. And I have my Misty. The other thing I'm going to show you now, just before I get started, is some people asked me the other day about what I was using as a handle on my ink pad. They saw me doing a picture or a video or a blog or something. So I wanted to show you this. Blue Night Rubber Stamps sells this block, and it has these really strong magnets embedded in the back of the block. So my issue is that my ink pads that have narrow bottoms, like Memento, the case, I love the ink, but the case is really narrow. When I pick it up, sometimes I drop it. So what this tool from Blue Night Rubber Stamps does is you buy these little metal plates from them along with the handle. They're all sold separately. And then you just take your ink pad and you peel off this. This is really strong sticky on the back of this. So you just peel this off. Whoops, let me see. Okay, so now this is really sticky. You put this on the back of your ink pad. It's permanent. It's going to stay on there, not going anywhere. Okay? And then these 2 magnets stick to that. So now when I'm inking on my Misty, I have this I'm holding on to. I don't have to grip this little part of the ink pad on the outside. I can do this and have really good grip on my ink pad. So I just set this up. I hadn't done my VersaFine yet. I don't know why. I just never did it. So today I did that. One by one, I'm converting my thin bottomed ink pads. So I think we're ready to start stamping now. Let me see. I have my Misty out. I've chosen this piece. This is the background that I want to use. So I'm just going to secure this in my Misty. And then I'm going to position the stamp on here. And now I'm going to ink it up with, whoops, first I have to close the lid. Okay, I'm going to ink this up. And you'll see me doing that on this side. I'm going to give it a really good coating of ink. Really good. Okay, now VersaFine's a little bit, Versamark's a little bit sticky. So you'll feel that when you're inking this up. So now I'm going to just make sure the whole, this is an intricate image, it's got a lot of little details. So I'm just making sure I put enough ink on that. And now I'm going to stamp it and get it ready for some embossing powder. Okay, so I'm going to give it one more inking just to make sure that I got a good image, because watercolor cardstock is sometimes not really smooth. So I want to make sure that whatever inking I've done is really getting onto the image and then transferring onto the cardstock. So one more time down. That's the beauty of having a stamping tool. You could restamp in the same place twice and get the same image. Okay, so this is ready. You can't really see the image, especially because we've colored the background with ink, but it's on there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to set my Misty aside, and I'm going to take the embossing powder. This is, somebody asked which embossing powder I use. This is Sparkle and Sprinkle Ultra Fine Gold Detail Embossing Powder. And I'm just gonna kind of push this up on here and then flip it over and put some more. Just be careful if you do it this way not to scrape the cardstock, because you'll scrape the Versamark off and you won't get it sticking. Then I just tap off the extra, tap it again. Okay, I think you could see. You see all the gold embossing powder on there? Now I usually take it to the side off of my workspace and I just give it a tap on the edge of the table, kind of like this. And that will take off any extra. Then I take a look. Remember I told you I had this brush here that's not for painting. It's just a brush. I look and I see, oh, there's a little piece of embossing powder there I want to get rid of. And really, I didn't have much on here because I had put anti-static rub on here before. Okay, so this is ready to go. I just cleaned off that little speck that was on there. I can set this aside. Whoops. Whoops, let me get my ink pad out of the way. Okay, so I can set this aside. So now what I need is my heat gun. I'm using this one today, the Stampin' Up! Heat gun. I have another one by Wagner that I really love, but I had this one handy. So this is going to take a little bit of time, but you'll see as I'm doing it, it's going to change and become shiny. So the powder when it hasn't been heated is like a dull finish. But then when you heat it up, it starts to turn shiny, and that's how you know it's melted. So I'm not going to talk while this is happening, but it'll start to take place in a few minutes, and then we're ready to paint. I'm heating the back to help speed up the process, because that just means I'm heating it from underneath a little bit. But mostly I'm doing it from the top. And this is already starting to turn. Over here in this area, that dull powder look is starting to turn into a shiny edge, and you'll see all that's going to turn gold now. You want to go back and look at your image. If you see any spots that look shiny gold, but other spots look dull, the dull is telling you more heat. You need more heat to melt it, so just go back. Like I see down here, this little spot is dull, and there you go. I put heat on it, and it turned gold. Okay, guess what? This piece is ready to be watercolored. Okay, I'm going to turn this off. I'm going to set my heat gun aside. Okay, so I'm going to hold this up so you can see this is all heat embossed, all so beautiful. I mean, the gold is just so pretty. Okay, can you see? I'll hold it up a little bit this way. There you go. All right, so now the other question I get asked a lot is, how do I get my cardstock not to buckle after it's been heat embossed and inked up and wet and it dries? So what I do is I hold it in my hands and I just kind of curve it down the edges. I go around all four edges down in a downward movement, like you're making an arch of that. And it just straightens out the sides. So this is pretty much ready to go. I can show you that on another one because I know that was a big question I got, that everybody's cardstock buckles up. So here's one that's kind of, you can see it's not really straight, it's kind of bumpy. So you just take your hand and just go down all around the four edges and you'll see it'll straighten out. The other thing you can do is when something's wet, if you give it heat from the back and it was starting to curl up, when you heat the back, it'll start to curl down. So now we're ready to watercolor. And what I'm going to do is, I'm going to work on this mat today. I have a couple of different mats I like to use, but I'm choosing just to work on this mat. This way I could put ink on the side and I have a place to work. So I'm just taking carpenter's tape. I don't want to damage so much of the edge when I peel it off later, so I'm going very close to the edge. This painter's tape, I said carpenter's tape. Okay, so I'm just putting a little bit of tape down here because I'm going to crop this down later anyway when I make my card front. So I'm just going to stick this down on here now. Okay. Now because it's this kind of matte, it doesn't stick like it would stick on another background, but it's sticking enough for me to work today. So I'm happy with the job that this will do. Okay. It's just enough, holding it down for me. Okay. All right. So now I have my water ready. I'm going to put the water on my workspace, but to the side. And I think what I'll do first is I'm going to mist the whole piece. I'm not going to flood this with water, but I am going to mist it. And there's two things about this. when I remist it today, it's going to kind of reactivate that ink on the background. So, whoops, this isn't sticking today. I think because I put water on it. Okay, so you know what? With that, let me show you plan B. I'm going to take my piece and I'm just going to tape it down to this. And I can work that way. I thought that I could skip a step and just use my mat, but that didn't work out. So let me just do this. Get this piece nice and flat. I have another board that's all set up for watercoloring, but I thought I could take a shortcut. Okay, so here we are. This is ready to go. So I just misted this a little to get the piece wet so that it receives the paint a little bit better, and you'll have some movements when you add color. And I think I'm going to start out with, well, let me get the paints out. Okay, so my paints are ready to go. I'm going to put them off here to the side. You'll be able to see them a little bit as I'm working with them. So I'm going to, I think today I'm going to opt to work with just some traditional brushes to start out. Okay, so I have some brushes out here. I'm going to take a brush that's a little bit on the smaller side. And I'm going to start with this flower over here. Okay, let's see if you can see that. Okay, so I'm going to start with this flower here. I'm going to wet my brush. I've got it over here off to the side. I'm just making sure I wet it nicely. Okay, and then I always keep paper towel. I always keep a folded paper towel handy right in my paint area because there's a lot of dabbing the brush off if there's too much water or too much color. So I think I'm going to start with a darker pink. I'm going to pick up some of this pink over here. So my wet brush is going on there, and if you don't add a lot of water, you get very dense color. If you add a lot of water, you get lighter color. So I'm just going to start out by putting some of this pink close to the center of the flower. And you could see it's already moving. The color is already moving out. So let's see if I can get this to come in a little bit closer for you. Okay. So it starts to move out already, and at that point, what I'll do is I'll take my brush that's filled with water, the aqua painter, and I'm just going to squeeze it and add a little water to this to get it to move around a little. Now you see that came out a little bit too much, but that's okay because you could just blot it up and pick up the excess water. That's because I gave it a hard squeeze. Okay, so you're just going to add water, and you see what's happening. The color is moving out onto the rest of the flower, but it's still leaving the darker colors. Now, if you notice, I just dabbed off my brush on the paper towel on the side. Okay, so there we go. Now, if I wanted to add a little more of the darker color in there, I could still use my aqua painter. Just pick this up and just dab a little color. Now, I told you the other day when I did the first video, I'm sure there are artists who are going to look at me doing this video and go, oh my God, what is she teaching these people to do? Well, I'm not classically trained. I'm not trained at all as an artist, but I know that I like to work with color. I enjoy it and I experiment. So this is my way of painting flowers, but I respect and I understand those who have different styles and do it a different way. We all have to develop our own style while we paint. And while you do anything that's artistic or crafty or creative. So I'm kind of going with the same color family, but now I picked a darker paint color from the pan set from Altenew. And if you notice, this flower is just a little darker. Okay, so I want to do all of these in pink. So today I'm sticking with all of the pinks. I'm going to just do this one. I'm going to put a lot of color on this one. I want to have this one be a little bit darker than the others. This brush tip is a little bit big for this small flower, but I'm managing, but I have to be very careful. So sometimes it's nice to have a very small brush for these areas. So if you've watched my videos before, you know that I'm always talking about air drying my images. That's just my preference. I don't like to use an air gun when I'm drying things because I feel that all this liquid gets pushed around and it doesn't give the natural ability of the ink to move around with the water. So now I've got the 3 flowers colored. I think I'm gonna go with the dark again, really dark color down here. I'm gonna add this in. I'm just putting a little bit because I'm going to pull it out then with just plain water. So, okay, so I'm rinsing my brush off, dabbing it off, but I'm keeping a little water on it so I don't have to squeeze that much. And you just add it, and then if you dab it around, it pulls the color out. And you can go in an outward movement, like pull the color out a little bit, but not to the edge because you don't want to bring it, because if you go to the edge, you're going to have solid dark color. If you just keep it light, you'll have a variation of color because the water will have less ink than, less paint than the inner part. Okay, so now I'm moving on to this flower. There's another little tiny flower, and I think I'll go back to the lighter pink and add some of that in here. And I chose this background because it's a little bit lighter, and I thought you'd be able to see the painting a little bit more than on a darker one. And then these over here, I think what I'm gonna do with these is I'm going to, no, I better not. I think I'm gonna stick with these. I'll stick all with the Altenew today, except for the leaves. I'll show you some of the other painting with the leaves. So I'm going back to the darkest of the Altenew colors, and I'm gonna use that on this flower over here. And what I wanna do is I wanna make that flower even a little bit darker. So I'm going to take just a tiny, tiny bit of this really dark color. It's almost like a purple tone. I'm just going to drop it into this flower, little dabs of it, because now when I add some more water to each of these sections, I'll get some of that dark color as well. So if you're new to watercoloring, you'll probably really love heat embossing and watercoloring, because as I always describe it, when you heat emboss, all of the gold lines make a barrier. So you have less of a chance of flooding out your color if you don't know how to control the brush and the ink that much, or the paint. So by having it embossed, each little embossed area has like a barrier, like a dam around it. So that's really helpful, especially if you're just learning to watercolor, because that will allow you then to control where your colors are going. So you notice I put a really dark color down on this one first. I'm rinsing my brush, I'm dabbing it off on the side, and now I'm going to go back with a lighter color, and that's going to give me some varied color on this flower. These flowers over here on the wildflower stamp are really small, so you need very little water and very little color. Okay, this one, I don't want it the exact same color, so I was able to carry enough color from this flower to the next one. And it's going to be a little lighter, but still the same color family. I'm borrowing some color from over here, bringing it over to the next flower. Okay. And now we're going on to the next one. I'm just dabbing on some color, rinsing my brush, leaving some water, and now just going back onto that one. That's getting a little bit too much water, so I want to control it a little more. Just move it around with your brush. Just try, what you want to try to do is not have too much that it goes beyond the embossing little barrier. So just utilize the embossing as your way to control your ink, especially when you're first learning or first attempting to watercolor. And I felt there was too much water in there, so I'm taking a little bit off. Okay, I'm going to go back to the really dark color and do this flower with the dark color, and also add some of the lighter color. So I wanted all these to be in the same color family. That's why I'm working with the same three colors. Okay, that one. Now I want to touch that one up. Now I'm going to move on to this one. Okay. Alrighty. We're almost done with the flowers, and then we're going to move on to the leaves. So just adding a little, my brush is way too wet. I keep dabbing it onto the side. I don't know if you see me doing that, but I'm still feeling like I have too much color on there. So, all right, well, I think we're done with the flowers. Let me just check. Yes. So now we're ready to move on to the leaves. So for the leaves, I'm going to start out with the pan colors, with the Altenew with the pans. I'm going to use the ink right out of the pan, but then I'm going to move on to showing you how to pick the ink up from a tile. So I'm going to start out, I rinsed my brush off. I'm actually going to use I'm going to use a very small regular paintbrush for this part. Okay, so I don't know if you could see, this is just a very small little brush. And I'm going to pick up the medium color green off of the pan set. I'm going to start out painting, just so you could see easier, one of the bigger leaves. All right, look at how easy that is. 1, 2, 3, you've got a leaf. But I don't want to have it all one color, so now I'm going to go over to the darker green, and I'm going to pick up a little of the darker green and just bring it into that leaf that already has the green in it. And it might not look like there's a lot of color variation here, but when this dries, you're going to really, really see a lot of the darker green coming through in this. Okay, so now you have some color variation in that leaf. I'm going to do the same thing to the leaf that's next to it. Just adding a little of the darker green to give it some interest. And I'm going to continue on painting the rest of the leaves. And I'm using basically 2 or 3 colors of green so that it doesn't all look like they were done in the same color. And you can see this image is just coming to life. When you're doing just all the pink at first, it's like, oh, it's a little bit boring. But when you start adding the other colors to it, it's just beautiful. So I'm choosing to do the larger leaves first so that you can see them, because I know that, you know, it's a little bit small for you to see. Let me see if I can come down a little more. Well, let's see. So right now I'm just doing a few of the leaves with the light color. All right, now this is Altenew colors, so they coordinate really well. They're handy to use in the pan. Okay, but I don't want them all to be the same color, remember? So I keep going back and forth between the light color and the dark color. And sometimes you just need a dab, because remember, the water is going to carry that color out. So you're going to wind up with varied color in this. Tomorrow when it's dry, or later tonight, this is going to be absolutely beautiful. Okay, so here I am. I'm using the pan colors to do this image. But now I want to show you what I told you before. Remember I was telling you that I sometimes use a tile to put color. Can you see the tile? Yeah. I use a tile and I use the ink pad to put color. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what to do with that. Sometimes I mist this with water directly. So you can do very slightly though. Put like a drop of water in the corner. Because now look what happens. It liquefies the color. And I'm getting my own palette that I'm making. Depending on how much water you put is how light or dark it's going to get. So I've picked up the color from there, and here I go. And it's giving me the same color that you get from the Altenew pans, because it's the same company and it's the same color palette. So I'm just adding color to these leaves over here. And truthfully, I love this color so much that it makes a great base color for all of the leaves. And then you can lighten them and darken them up as you want. So one by one, I mean, this is just an absolutely beautiful image to work with. Wildflowers has become my favorite. And in my little Etsy shop that I have, I got so many requests for people that wanted, you know, me to make these cards for them. So it's just a pleasure. I'm going down the stems now, but it's a pleasure to work with this image, especially heat embossed. It's just, I colored it also with Copics, but for some reason, heat embossed and watercolor, just, I really love it. So look at how quickly this is going. So those of you who were like, sent me messages, oh my God, I could never do that. I'll watch the video, but I can tell you now I won't be able to do it. Look, you can do this. I'm telling you, you can do this, because it's just the easiest thing and it's so relaxing. Okay, so I'm going down the stems now of these. Okay, I'm just picking up some color and putting it down. And then I want to fill in all these little leaves. You know, believe it or not, guys, we're almost done. I am going to go back and add some other colors to highlight. But you see what I'm doing? I'm just picking up the color off of the piece of tile. And if I go to an area that doesn't have much water, I'll get like a darker color. Okay, so guess what? Now I'm going to go over the image and just look. Did I get everything? Guess what? I did get everything with the lighter color. So now I'm going to take Altenew's darker color. This is, what is this called? Evergreen. And I'm just going to stamp a little bit over here. You could see already that it's a darker color. See, it's darker. And I'm going to use that to go back into the leaves that I just painted. just to give them a little tiny dab of the dark color, because that, when it dries, is going to give the leaf a lot of dimension and make it look natural. So if you notice, I'm just going back a little bit of color, and some of them I'll give a little more because in nature nothing's identical. So I'm just adding some color to these just to make them look interesting and have some color variation. And if you notice, I'm kind of doing a dabbing motion. I'm just kind of I'm dabbing the ink, and then I'm just going, look at, I'm giving one little dot to each of these. And that's going to be enough on these tiny leaves, just that they have some interest to them, that they don't all look like you took a crayon and just colored them all the same color green. So we're almost done, guys. This has been like easy, and it's just, think, if you can follow along and have the interest to do this on a small image, imagine the magic you'll be able to do comfortably on something that is a bigger image. This is tedious, so learning to do this first, I think, is a great start for somebody, because if you can do this, you could do other things as well. Okay, so guess what? This image to me is completed. Now the trick is to be patient. I know that some people like, I'm just washing everything up while I talk to you. Some people like to use the heat gun to speed up the drying process. But to tell you the truth, guys, I don't do that. It's just my choice. I respect what everybody wants to do. But for me, I'm just not into it, because I really like an image to dry naturally on its own. So this is wet, but I want to turn it around and show it to you. I mean, it's so, so beautiful. The colors are just so pretty. And when this dries, you're going to have a beautiful, beautiful card front. So what I do is I usually take, the day that I'm heat embossing, I will create, as you know, I create a stack of backgrounds. So I have all these pretty backgrounds. And this time, you notice I wanted to work with the blues and greens. There's some pink colors in here, but mostly blues and greens. So I make all of those. Then I sit, and sometimes I just come out here at night into the studio, and I'll stamp and I'll heat emboss a whole pile of the images, or one image that I want to work with. So I already have these ready to go. So after I finish making the video, I'm going to sit, I have my paints out, I have everything out, and I'm just going to keep painting, and I'll do some in different color families. And that is it. So now I have to ask you the big question. All of you who never had faith in yourself that you could watercolor paint, do you think now, after watching this video, that you could do it? Can I get the camera up? Do you think you could do it? Because I really think you can. I think that watercoloring is so relaxing. It's so beautiful. What you can do with color and pigments is just so amazing. You can use Ken Oliver's Color Burst. You can use ink pads. You can use pans. You can start out watercoloring with pencils, Inktense pencils. It's like coloring with a pencil, but then when you add your wet brush to it, it pulls the color out and liquefies it, and you're going to get the same look as this. So I think you should give it a try. You asked me so many questions. I wanted to get you the video. Now I've taught you how to make a background so that you don't have to worry about painting the image and then cutting into the image with a paintbrush and not making the ink bleed. Now I've taught you heat emboss. It serves as a barrier to keep the color in. So you know that little trick. Create the background with ink, spritz it, let them dry. Now you've got a background done already, which is very easy and takes on a watercolor look. I've just showed you how to use water. You mist your piece first, then use paintbrushes to add your color if you're using solid pan colors, or ink, or you can apply ink to a tile or an acrylic block. I've showed you two different brushes to use, the Aqua Painter, which holds water in the barrel, or just use regular paintbrushes. So it's a lot of little basic things. It's really not difficult to do, and I think that if you give it a try on this image, this wildflowers image is just so, so beautiful to work with. So the ink pads are Altenew, the pan colors were Altenew, the paint brushes were by Ranger, they come as a set. The mister bottle is the Tim Holtz Distress Sprayer, but you can use any little mister bottle that you have, even from the dollar store. The aqua painters, these are from, I believe these are Stampin' Up, but Pentel sells them. Just don't buy real like dollar store ones, because the hairs will come out and you just, it's a waste of money, and you won't have a product that works for you. You'll have hairs all over your work. The tiles, Any tile works. If you're in the hardware store and they have a sale on some tile that's a neutral color because you want to see your ink on it, so always get like white, not even ivory, get a white tile. You can just apply your ink pads, create your own palette. You're doing the same thing that the Altenew or any other solid pans do. So these are Altenew inks on here. Find your favorite inks. Stampin' Up! Ink works. Distress ink works. The Altenews work great. The Ton inks work. Gina K inks, beautiful for watercoloring. The colors are amazing. And she's coordinated with her cardstock and her paint, her colors of her ink, so you can create beautiful cards. The embossing powder I keep in a little container is by Sparkle and Sprinkle fine gold detail embossing powder. I keep in a little case with a little tasting spoon, and you're all set. That's about it, guys. I hope that you enjoyed this. Look, this is drying already. You can see the changes in it already. Look at that color. Just look how pretty that is. I don't want to hold it up too much because I don't want the water to run, but it's just so look at the gold. Okay, so who's gonna go up for this video now and go watercolor and get out your embossing powder that you never use? Oh, get out a heat gun. You can't use a blow dryer. Don't try that. That's not a good idea. Just remember, when you put the powder on the image, after you use the Versamark, stamp once or twice. If you have a stamp positioning tool like the Tim Holtz platform, Making Memories, or the Misty, of course. Stamp twice to get a good coating of the ink. Put your embossing powder on it, check, tap it off, make sure you get the excess off, and then heat it. And when you see that powder that has a dull finish start to shine like gold, or if you do silver, then you'll know that it's ready to be done. Doesn't even have to cool, just set it aside 1 second. By the time you put your heat gun away, it's ready to be painted. So I hope that this video was helpful. I tried to do something really basic so that you won't be intimidated by giving it a try. I love sharing my watercolor stuff with you, and I want to thank you for being interested in what I do. There are so many amazing, talented card makers all over Facebook and social media. I am inspired by all of them, and it's so humbling and flattering to me that you were inspired by something that I made. So thank you guys for watching, and I'm sorry I was a little out of sorts today, but I don't know, I'm just not feeling so great. But have a great day, and I'll be back soon with another video, I hope, of something else that you might like to see. Bye, guys.